Well, we've been talking about this since it happened, the sacking, I guess you'd say, of Andrew Thorburn from the Essendon Football Club. Peter Dutton and many others have accused the football club of discrimination for sacking him because of his conservative religious beliefs. Well, I don't know that it's necessarily because of his conservative religious beliefs. It's because of somebody else's. But what are the legal ramifications of this? Litigation expert Alex Martin says the dismissal could expose the club to $1 million damages claim. He joins us on the line. Alex, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen.
There's a couple of problems I see here. Is that firstly, it's guilt by association. He was not actually sacked for anything he said himself. He was sacked for somebody that somebody else said years before he was associated with this particular church. But given that he's resigned or was forced to resign, does that take some of the power out of his hands?
Yes, it does seem like that he was... that the issue was around him being a member of a church and some other pastor in the church making some statements. So it is sort of guilt by association rather than something that he's done. And I think it's important to look at his own record, not the record of the church or of anyone else. I think it does. It seems that he's resigned. That's the wording that's been used in most of the statements about this. And if he has resigned, if he's resigned through his own volition, then that means that he won't have a legal claim. If you resign, usually you give up your claim. But if he's been in a situation where they call it constructive dismissal, where they've given him really no choice but to resign, then that's still a dismissal, and so then he could still have a legal claim. So it really depends on what exactly happened. Because
the thing that it also got me is the statements from the president of the Essendon Football Club, Barham, who has come out and said, the law prevented, and I'm paraphrasing here, the law prevents you from asking about somebody's religious beliefs in a job interview. You're not allowed to do that.
Yes.
But once he was hired, apparently then it's open slather and they can go through and then do background checks on whatever this bloke's religious beliefs are and then effectively ask him to resign after. I mean, there seems to be a conflict there.
Sure, yeah, it does seem a bit confusing. I think this is a failure of due diligence. They should have done better due diligence. This is a major appointment. Ernst & Young were the consultants who were retained to do the due diligence, so they're a major accounting firm. They had a committee to do it. This is not just hiring the receptionist. This is hiring the CEO of the club. Yep. It's a major effort. They should have done a due diligence. They should have discovered this before and acted on it before they hired him. It's true that you can't ask employees or potential employees about certain things, but I think this is something they could have found out. He was the chairman of this church. They could have found that out easily by doing a proper due diligence beforehand.
The problem here I see, and I've raised this with a Labor senator who is of the Catholic faith. The Prime Minister is Catholic, so am I. The Premier of Victoria claims to be Catholic. The Catholic Church would hold similar views to this particular church. Does that mean that the Prime Minister and the Premier of Victoria need to resign too? I mean, this opens a real can of worms, doesn't it?
Yes, I think some people who call themselves Catholic would have similar views. I think what this pastor said was beyond what most Catholics in Australia would believe. But in any event, it does raise the freedom of religion. And I think it's important in our system, and it's important in this case, to separate what somebody believes privately, what somebody's religion is, and what they do and what they say in the course of their job. And actually, Thorburn has a very good record of inclusivity at National Australia Bank. You know, National Australia Bank, while he was CEO, sponsored the NAB Challenge, which was a gay pride AFL match. So I don't think Thorburn could be accused of being anti-gay in his professional life.
Yeah, and I guess the flip side of that is when you talk about due diligence, I mean, there were all sorts of other problems at the NAB when Andrew Thorburn was the boss there.
Yes, that's right.
I would have thought they were more relevant to whether or not he's a fit and proper person to lead a football club as opposed to what he believes when he goes to church.
Yes, that's right. So the Royal Commission criticised Mr. Thorburn and a lot of other senior banking executives, but in particular, he was singled out as being someone who didn't understand the gravity of the mistakes that were made. So I think if you wanted to criticise Mr. Thorburn, you could do for some of his failings in his professional life, and that's where we should focus. We shouldn't be focusing on his religion or on what a pastor said in 2013 that's associated with the religion that he's associated with. That seems like a stretch to me.
Now, you've said a better approach would have been to ask the candidates if they endorse the values of the football club and would be prepared to defend them publicly. I guess the only answer you could have is say yes to that. I mean, will you defend the values of the organisation you're trying to get into? But could they ask him, do you defend the values of the church that you belong to? Are they allowed to ask that question?
They could do in this context. I think, again, we're not talking about hiring a salesperson to go on the road for your organisation. We're talking about the CEO of a major club, so it's a major appointment. We're talking about a serious salary package. Yeah. I think in those circumstances, you can talk about values, and you can talk about the values of the organisations that you're involved in. And he's the chairman of the church. He's not just a parishioner. He's not just a member. He's a chairman. And so I think you can say, well, if you've got this other role, how's that going to impact on this role? And I think that would be a reasonable question to ask him before they hired him and shortly after they hired him as well.
Yeah, because I reckon there'd be a bunch of players they'd have to sack too if you really took this to the nth degree. Extraordinary situation. It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. Alex, really good to talk to you. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Steve.
All the best. Alex Martin, he's a litigation specialist and partner at Taurus Legal Management. It's going to be interesting to see whether or not Andrew Thorburn does take legal action and how this all plays out. Let's have a quick look at sport.